Sergeant Park Junho stood at attention as the shuttle docked with the Valari diplomatic starship known as the Eternal Harmony. And he kept his face completely still, even though his heart was beating fast inside his chest. He had served in the Human Alliance military for 7 years. But this was his first time boarding an alien vessel as part of the new security exchange program between humans and the Valari Empire. And he knew that every move he made would be watched and judged by creatures who still considered his species to be dangerous primitives from a death world. The airlock opened with a soft hiss, and Junho stepped through into a corridor that seemed to be made of living crystal, with walls that glowed in soft shades of blue and purple that shifted like water under moonlight. A Valari officer waited for him on the other side, tall and thin with skin that looked like polished glass and eyes that were completely silver without any visible pupils at all. "You are the human," the officer said, and his voice carried a tone of barely hidden distaste that Junho pretended not to notice. "Sergeant Park Junho, reporting for duty as ordered," Junho replied with a respectful nod. The Valari officer turned without another word and began walking down the corridor, clearly expecting Junho to follow, and so he did, keeping his steps measured and calm even as he felt the stares of every crew member they passed along the way. The Valari were beautiful in a way that made humans feel rough and unfinished, with their crystalline features and graceful movements that seemed to flow like music made visible. But Junho also noticed how they flinched slightly whenever he came too close, as if they expected him to attack at any moment. He understood their fear even if he did not share it, because humans had a reputation in the galaxy as survivors from one of the most dangerous planets ever discovered. A world of extreme temperatures and violent weather and predators that never stopped hunting. And the fact that humans had not only survived, but thrived on such a world made other species deeply uncomfortable. The officer led him to a small quarters near the outer edge of the ship, barely larger than a storage closet, and gestured for him to enter. "You will remain here when not on duty," the officer said. "Your assignment is the night watch outside the chambers of Princess Lyrian Valsorth, third daughter of the Empress herself. It is a ceremonial position only, and you are expected to stand quietly and cause no trouble. Is that understood?" Junho nodded once. Understood completely. The officer left without another word, and Junho set down his small bag of personal belongings and sat on the narrow bed to wait for his first shift to begin. He thought about what he knew of the Valari and their empire, remembering the briefings he had received before departure. They were an ancient species, far older than humanity, and they possessed technology that humans could barely understand. But they were also fragile in ways that humans were not, with bodies that broke easily and minds that were sensitive to the emotions of those around them. That last part was important, Junho recalled. The Valari were empaths who could sense the feelings of other beings, which meant they would know exactly how he felt at any given moment, and he made a mental note to keep his emotions as steady and calm as possible. When night came according to the ship's artificial cycle, Junho made his way to the royal section of the vessel and took his position outside a door made of the same living crystal as the walls, and he stood there in silence as the hours passed slowly by. Through the small observation panel in the door, he could see movement inside the chamber, and he realized after a while that the princess was pacing back and forth across her room with quick and restless steps that never seemed to stop. He checked the security logs on his wrist display and discovered something that made him frown. According to the records, Princess Lyrian had not slept in 3 days, and her vital signs showed elevated stress levels that had been climbing higher with each passing night. Junho watched her pace until his shift ended, and the next night he watched her pace again, and on the third night he saw her stop suddenly and turn toward the door as if she had felt him watching. Their eyes met through the observation panel, and Junho saw fear in her silver gaze. A deep and terrible fear that seemed to have nothing to do with him at all. And then she looked away quickly and resumed her endless pacing. He began to pay closer attention after that, watching not just the princes, but also the other people on the ship. And he noticed things that troubled him deeply. There was a Valari lord named Velen who commanded the Internal Guard. And he was the princess's own cousin by blood. But Junho saw how his eyes followed her whenever she left her chambers. And the look in those eyes was not the look of family loyalty. The other guards deferred to Lord Velen with a fear that seemed excessive, and Junho noticed that several of them always positioned themselves near the princes in ways that felt more like surveillance than protection. On his 5th night of duty, Junho stood at his post and watched the princess pace and wondered what was keeping her awake. And he realized with growing certainty that she was not afraid of threats from outside the ship at all. Whatever she feared was already here, walking the same corridors and breathing the same recycled air, and she knew it was close, but could not prove it or stop it. Junho was just a human, a primitive from a death world, assigned to a ceremonial position that meant nothing. But as he watched the princess pace through another sleepless night, he made a quiet decision in his heart. He would find out what was wrong, and he would fix it. Because that was what humans did when they saw someone in trouble. And no amount of alien politics or species prejudice would stop him from doing what was right. Junho spent the next several days watching and learning, keeping his observations to himself, while he pieced together the truth of what was happening aboard the Eternal Harmony. Lord Velen was everywhere, it seemed, always finding reasons to be near the princess during her public appearances. Always speaking to her with words that sounded respectful, but carried an undertone of something darker that Junho could sense even without Valari empathy. The princess responded to her cousin with perfect courtesy. But Junho noticed how her hands trembled slightly whenever Velen stood too close, and how her eyes would dart toward the exits as if measuring the distance to safety. He also noticed that several members of the ship's crew were more loyal to Velen than to the princess, and they watched her with the same hungry attention that their master showed, like predators waiting for the right moment to strike. On the 7th night of his assignment, the princess surprised him by speaking through the door. "Human," she said, and her voice was soft and musical even when tired. "You stand there every night without moving or complaining. Do you never grow bored?" Junho considered his answer carefully before responding. "I grew up on Earth, Your Highness. We learned patience by waiting through long winters and watching for predators that might attack at any moment. Standing still is easy compared to that." There was a pause, and then the princess asked another question. "What is Earth like?" "I have read reports, but reports cannot capture the truth of a place." And so Junho began to tell her about his home world, about the mountains that touched the clouds and the oceans that stretched beyond sight, about forests full of creatures that could kill a person in 100 different ways in cities, where millions of humans lived together in noisy harmony. The princess listened through the door, and each night after that she asked him more questions about human families and human customs and human dreams, and Junho answered as honestly as he could. On the 12th night, she asked a question that cut straight to the heart of things. "Why do humans sleep so easily? I have watched the recordings from Earth, and your people simply close their eyes and rest as if it were the simplest thing in the world. How do you do it?" Junho thought about this for a long moment. "I suppose we sleep easily because we know that worrying will not change anything. Whatever problems exist will still be there in the morning, so we might as well face them with rested minds and bodies." "I wish I could think that way," the princess said, and her voice carried such weariness that Junho felt his heart ache for her. "But I cannot rest because I feel too much. Someone on this ship wishes me harm, and I sense their hatred every night like poison seeping through the walls. It keeps me awake no matter how tired I become." Junho understood then why she could not sleep, and he also understood why she had started talking to him in particular. "Your Highness," he said carefully, "I have heard that Valari are sensitive to the emotions of those nearby. Is it possible that I am different? That my emotions do not reach you the same way?" "Yes," she admitted. "Your mind is like a stone wall, solid and steady and quiet. When you stand outside my door, the hatred from elsewhere seems muffled and distant. It is the only peace I have found since this voyage began." Junho made a decision without fully thinking it through. "Then let me stand closer. If my presence helps, I can be inside the room instead of outside. I will sit in the corner and make no sound, and perhaps you will finally be able to sleep." There was a long silence, and Junho wondered if he had overstepped his bounds. But then the door opened, and the princess stood before him in her sleeping robes, looking fragile and exhausted and desperate. "Come in," she said, "and please help me rest." Junho entered her chambers and took a seat in the far corner, positioning himself where he could watch both the door and the windows. And he sat there in perfect stillness while the princess lay down on her bed. At first, she simply stared at the ceiling, her body tense and her breathing shallow. But gradually he saw her muscles relax and her breathing slow. And within an hour, she was sleeping deeply for the first time in weeks. Junho watched over her through the night, and he felt a strange warmth in his chest that he did not fully understand. But he pushed that feeling aside and focused on his duty. When morning came according to the ship's cycle, the princess woke and looked at him with wonder in her silver eyes. "I slept. I actually slept." "How did you do this?" "I did nothing special," Junho replied. "I simply sat here and thought calm thoughts." "You saved me," she said, and there was a depth of gratitude in her voice that made Junho uncomfortable. "No one has been able to help me, not the doctors or the counselors or the priests, but you sat in a corner and gave me more peace than all of them combined." But their moment of quiet victory was interrupted by a chime at the door, and when the princess opened it, Lord Velen stood outside with cold fury burning in his silver eyes. "Cousin," he said, and the words sounded like a threat, "I see the human has found his way inside your private chambers." "How very interesting." Junho saw the fear return to the princess's face, and he understood that whatever happened next would determine the course of everything that followed. Lord Valen wasted no time in spreading word of what he had seen, and within hours the entire ship was buzzing with scandal and speculation about the human guard who had spent the night in the princess's private chambers. Junho endured the stares and whispers without complaint, keeping his face blank and his emotions steady. But he could see how the situation was affecting Princess Lyrian, who walked through the corridors with her head held high even as her people gossiped behind her back. On the third day after the incident, Valen made his move in public, confronting Junho in the main gathering hall where dozens of Valari could witness the humiliation he planned to inflict. "Human," Valen said loudly, making sure everyone could hear. "You have violated the sanctity of royal privacy and brought shame upon this vessel. I demand that you be removed from your position and confined to quarters until we reach the station." Junho stood in attention and said nothing, because he knew that anything he said would be twisted and used against him. "Well," Valen pressed, stepping closer with a sneer on his crystalline features, "do you have nothing to say for yourself? Perhaps your primitive brain cannot comprehend the severity of your offense." Before Junho could respond, a clear voice rang out across the hall. "He stays." Princess Lyrian walked through the crowd, which parted before her like water, and she came to stand beside Junho with fire in her silver eyes. "By my command," she continued, "Sergeant Park remains at his post. He has done nothing wrong, and I will not allow him to be punished for following my orders." Valen's expression flickered with barely controlled rage. Cousin, you cannot be serious. This creature entered your private chambers. The impropriety alone demands consequences. The only impropriety I see, Lyrian replied coldly, is a lord who questions the decisions of his princess in public. Do you forget your place, Velen? The hall fell silent, and Junho watched the conflict play out between the two nobles, feeling the tension crackling in the air like electricity before a storm. Valen backed down, but the hatred in his eyes promised that this matter was far from finished, and he retreated with his loyal guards following close behind. Later that night, Lyrian summoned Junho to her chambers and explained the full truth of her situation. My mother, the Empress, is dying, she said, and grief colored every word. She has perhaps months left, maybe less. When she passes, the succession will be decided by the Council of Houses, and whoever controls me controls the strongest claim to the throne. Junho listened carefully. And Lord Valen wants that control. He has wanted it for years, Lyrian confirmed. He cannot take the throne himself because he is not of direct lineage. But if he were my guardian or my husband, he would rule through me. He has been positioning himself since before this voyage began. Is that why you cannot sleep? Junho asked. Because you feel his hatred every night? Lyrian nodded, and tears gathered in her eyes. He projects his ambition and his contempt constantly. To a Valari empath, it is like being slowly poisoned. But when you are near, your mind blocks his influence. You are like a wall between me and his darkness. Junho understood then why she trusted him, and he felt the weight of responsibility settle onto his shoulders like armor. I will protect you, he said simply. Whatever comes. That night, the attack came. Junho was sitting in his corner while Lyrian slept when the walls themselves seemed to ripple and move, and three figures emerged from the solid crystal like ghosts stepping through water. Shadow dancers, he realized in an instant. Valari assassins who could phase through solid matter for brief moments, the most feared killers in the Empire. He was on his feet and moving before conscious thought caught up with instinct, throwing himself between the assassins and the bed where Lyrian lay. The first assassin struck with a blade of hardened light, and Junho caught the blow on his armored forearm, feeling the impact jar through his bones, then countered with a brutal punch that shattered the assassin's crystalline skull. The second assassin came from the side, and Junho twisted to avoid a killing stroke, taking a deep cut across his ribs instead, then grabbed the attacker and broke their neck with a sharp twist. The third assassin hesitated at the sight of their fallen companions, and that hesitation was all Junho needed to close the distance and drive his combat knife through their chest. But the wounded assassin was not dead, and they fled through the wall before Junho could finish them, leaving a trail of luminescent blood that faded as they escaped. Lyrian was awake now, staring at the bodies on her floor and at Junho standing over them with blood running down his side. You are hurt, she said, and her voice trembled. I will live, Junho replied, pressing one hand against his wound. They did not get to you. That is what matters. Why? She asked, and the question carried more weight than the single word suggested. Why would you risk your life for me? Junho looked at her, this beautiful alien princess who had no reason to trust him, and he gave her the only answer that made sense. You are finally sleeping, he said. It seemed rude to let them interrupt. Lyrian stared at him for a long moment, and then she laughed, despite everything, and the sound was like bells ringing in the darkness. The next morning, the surviving assassin was traced back to Valen's personal guard. But without concrete proof of Valen's direct involvement, no action could be taken, and the Lord retreated behind walls of political protection while planning his next move. But now he knew that the human was dangerous, and Junho knew that the real fight was only beginning. 2 days remained before the Eternal Harmony would reach the neutral station where the peace negotiations awaited. and Lord Valen knew he was running out of time. Junho could see the desperation building in the Lord's movements, the way he gathered his loyal guards for whispered conversations that stopped whenever anyone else approached. And he knew that something terrible was coming. Valen struck first with politics rather than violence, filing a formal complaint against Junho for what he called inappropriate conduct with a member of the royal family. Human Alliance Command, eager to avoid a diplomatic incident, ordered Junho to submit to questioning aboard the ship, and he had no choice but to comply. "I will come with you," Princess Lurian announced when she heard the news. "Your Highness, that is not necessary," Junho said. "This is a military matter between me and my superiors." "It became my matter when you bled for me," Lurian replied firmly. "I will testify on your behalf, and I will make them understand that you have done nothing wrong." The hearing was held in a small conference room, with a Human Alliance officer participating via holographic communication and several Valari officials watching from the corners of the room. Valen was there as well, his silver eyes gleaming with satisfaction as the charges were read aloud. Junho stood at attention and answered every question with calm honesty, explaining his actions and his reasons without embellishment or excuse. Then Lurian rose to speak, and the room fell silent. "I asked Sergeant Park to enter my chambers," she said, her voice clear and strong. "I asked him because I was suffering, and he was the only one who could help. He has shown me more honor and more loyalty than my own blood, and I will not stand by while he is punished for his kindness." She turned to look at Valen directly. "This accusation is nothing more than political manipulation by those who wish to remove my protector, so they can continue their schemes against me. I see through it, and I reject it completely." Valen's expression twisted with fury. "Cousin, you disgrace yourself by defending this primitive. Can you not see that he has corrupted your judgment?" "The only corruption I see stands before me," Lurian replied coldly. Before the argument could continue, alarms began to blare throughout the ship, and red emergency lights flashed in every corridor. Valen smiled, and in that smile Junho saw the truth of what was happening. "I am afraid this hearing must be postponed," Valen said smoothly. "It seems we have a security emergency that requires my immediate attention." He left the room with his guards, and moments later his voice echoed through the ship's communication system. "Attention all crew," Valen announced. "Princess Lurian has been compromised by human influence and is no longer fit to represent the Empire in negotiations. As senior lord aboard this vessel, I am declaring myself Regent Protector until we reach the station and proper authorities can evaluate her condition. All loyal crew members will follow my orders. Anyone who resists will be treated as a traitor." Chaos erupted throughout the ship as crew members chose sides, some rallying to Valen and others trying to reach the princess to protect her. Junho did not hesitate. He grabbed Lurian's hand and pulled her through a side door, leading her through maintenance corridors that he had memorized during his first week aboard. "Where are we going?" Lurian asked as they ran. "Somewhere defensible," Junho replied. "Somewhere we can hold until help arrives." They reached the ship's garden chamber, a vast room filled with crystalline plants that grew in strange and beautiful patterns, and Junho sealed the door behind them. "This will not hold them for long," Lurian said. "It does not need to hold them for long," Junho replied. "It just needs to hold them long enough." But the doors burst open before he could explain further, and Valen strode into the garden with 30 armed guards at his back. Junho stepped in front of Lurian, his weapon raised and his body positioned to shield her completely. "Surrender the princess," Valen commanded, "and I will let you live, human. You can return to your primitive world and forget any of this ever happened." "No," Junho said simply. Valen laughed. "No? Do you understand what you are facing? 30 trained Valari warriors against one human. The odds are impossible." "Maybe," Junho admitted. but you will die first. I guarantee that. And she will live, because your soldiers will hesitate when you fall, and that hesitation will give the loyalists time to reach us. Your plan fails either way." Valen's expression faltered, and Junho saw something that surprised him. The Lord was actually sensing his emotions, reading the truth of his intent. "You mean it," Valen said slowly. "You actually mean to die here protecting her." "If that is what it takes," Junho confirmed. "But why?" Valen demanded. "She is nothing to you. An alien from a species that despises your kind. What could possibly drive you to throw away your life for her?" Junho did not answer with words, because words were not enough to explain the human heart. Instead, he simply stood there, weapon ready, utterly calm in the face of impossible odds, radiating a certainty that had nothing to do with hatred or anger or fear. He did not want to kill Valen. He did not want to kill anyone. But he would without hesitation, if that was what Lyrian needed. Valen stared at him for a long moment, and Junho watched the Lord's certainty begin to crumble. Because Valen had never encountered anything like this before. A being who faced death with absolute acceptance, who burned with protective determination without any trace of the negative emotions that Valari associated with violence. It was terrifying in a way that Valen had never imagined possible. The standoff in the garden chamber stretched into what felt like eternity, with Junho standing motionless before the princess and 30 Valari guards waiting for their lord's command to attack. But that command never came, because something was happening that none of them expected. Valen was broadcasting his emotions without meaning to, his fear and his uncertainty and his growing desperation flooding outward like poison into the minds of every Valari present. The guards could feel their lord's terror, could sense that he genuinely believed the human would kill him if they attacked, and that belief spread through them like wildfire. One by one, the guards began to lower their weapons, not because they were cowardly, but because their empathic nature made it impossible to follow a leader whose emotions screamed of defeat. "What are you doing?" Valen demanded, turning to face his soldiers. "I command you to attack. Take the princess now." But the more he shouted, the more his fear showed, and the more his guards pulled away from him. And all the while, Junho stood in perfect stillness, his emotions radiating that same impossible calm that had protected Lyrian through so many sleepless nights. The loyal crew members arrived moments later, having fought their way through the ship to reach the garden, and they found a scene that would be remembered in Valari history for generations to come. Lord Valen stood alone, abandoned by his own guards, while a single human blocked the path to the princess, with nothing but a weapon and an unbreakable will. "Lord Valen," the ship's captain announced, "you are under arrest for treason, attempted murder, and conspiracy against the royal family. Your guards have already confessed to your involvement in the assassination attempt. You will be confined until we reach the station." Valen screamed in rage and drew his own blade, charging toward Junho in a final desperate attack. But the human moved faster than the Valari lord could follow, disarming him with a single precise strike and putting him on the ground with a blow that rang like a bell through the garden. "It is over," Junho said, standing over the fallen lord. "Accept it." Valen looked up at him with hatred burning in his silver eyes. "This changes nothing. You are still just a human, a primitive animal from a death world. You will never be one of us." Junho shrugged. "I never wanted to be one of you. I just wanted to protect her. And I did." The guards took Valen away, and the ship continued its journey toward the neutral station, and the crisis was finally over. In the days that followed, evidence of Valen's conspiracy was found throughout the ship, documenting years of planning and manipulation that would have placed him on the throne through Lyrian's suffering. The princess testified before the Alliance and Imperial representatives when they arrived, And her words condemned her cousin more thoroughly than any physical evidence could. Junho expected to be reassigned after that, sent back to regular duty now that his mission was complete. But Princess Lyrian had other plans. "I am requesting you as my permanent guardian," she told him on the final night before they reached the station. "The Empress herself has approved the arrangement. You would be attached to my household, responsible for my safety wherever I go." Junho was surprised. "Your Highness, there must be dozens of Valari guards who are better suited for such a position. Guards who understand your people and your customs." "Perhaps," Lyrian agreed. "But they would understand my people. You understand me. That is far more valuable." She reached out and took his hand, her crystalline fingers cool against his human skin. "You saved my life, Junho. You gave me peace when no one else could. I am not ready to let you go." Junho looked at her, this alien princess who had become something more to him than just an assignment, and he found that he was not ready to let her go either. "Then I will stay," he said simply. That night, Lyrian asked him to remain in her chambers one more time, but this time there was no fear driving the request. "I do not need protection tonight," she admitted. "Valen is gone and his conspiracy is broken. But I find that I sleep better when you are near, and I do not want to give that up." She lay down on her bed and patted the space beside her. "Will you stay?" Junho hesitated. "Your Highness, it would not be proper for me to share your bed. The scandal alone would cause problems for you." Lyrian laughed, and the sound was warm and genuine. "I am a princess. I will decide what is proper and what is not. Now stop arguing and lie down." And so Junho lay beside her, stiff and awkward at first, but gradually relaxing as her breathing slowed and her body curled naturally toward his warmth. "You are so warm," she murmured sleepily. "I did not know humans were so warm. Like a fire that never burns." Junho watched her drift off to sleep, and he realized that somewhere along the way he had stopped being just a guard. He did not know what he was to her now, or what she was to him. But when she reached for his hand in her sleep, he did not pull away. He simply held her hand and watched over her until morning came, feeling something in his heart that he could not name but did not want to lose. The official records of the Valari Empire would eventually note that humans were dangerous and unpredictable, products of a death world that had forged them into something hard and fierce. But those same records would also contain a small addition, written by a princess who had learned something important about the species that the rest of the galaxy feared. Humans were dangerous, yes, but they were also warm in ways that had nothing to do with body temperature. They were loyal in ways that defied logic and protective in ways that asked for nothing in return. And for some beings in a cold and hostile galaxy, that warmth was worth more than all the power and technology in the universe. Princess Lyrian Valsoreth slept soundly that night and every night after, not because she needed a guardian, but because she had found something better. She had found a human who would stand beside her through anything, who would face impossible odds without hatred, who would bleed for her without hesitation. She had found warmth in the darkness between the stars, and she would never let it go.